Hey boys and girls, Night Stalker here. Today, welcome along to my gun tutorial for beginners. And today we're talking about guns. Lots of guns, all kinds of guns, and how to use guns. I might be a little bit excited about the guns. Let's see what's coming on. First of all, today we're going to talk about, basically, show you what happens when you get overrun with guns. We're going to talk about standing and shooting. We're going to talk about moving and shooting. How you direct fire and how that affects your troops in combat. We're going to show you a little bit about the advanced gun units. So we're going to talk about the Kreigsrats, the Imperial Arquebusiers, and also the Tersios. And most of the demos we're going to be doing in units that you probably already have with the Ironcap gunners and Demesne Arquebusiers. After that, we're probably going to talk about some doctrines, and then I'm going to show you a bit of combat demos for gunners that use these techniques. Come with me now over to the training room. We'll teleport there using Night Stalker magic. Alright boys and girls, the very first thing I'm going to show you today is what happens to the lower level gunners when they get into close combat. Now I feel fairly confident that at least some of you have had this experience finding your gunners in hand-to-hand combat. Now I should mention as well, these Sea Stag Death Dealers, they're a terrible unit. They are a premium unit, and they're just bad, because they're bad shots, not because they get stabbed in close combat like this. This happens to all gunners. So there we go. Quick way to start the video. They're dead. Let's go to the next one. Alright, so for the next segment of this video, watch what happens if I tell my unit to shoot in a direction, using the 1 key and selecting. Now what's going to happen here, different to the last video where the Sea Stag Death Dealers got out their swords and started fighting in close combat, is you'll notice that the Ironcap Arquebusiers here will continue to shoot. They won't draw their sidearm. They won't draw their sword and start attacking these troops. Now of course they're not going to survive against the sword and shield unit in close combat anyway, but this allows them to kill far more than they otherwise would have. This is especially useful if you're only being attacked by a part or a small unit. Now, here we've got the Demesne Arquebusiers, another mid-tier gunner unit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow them to show you, so I'll allow them just to shoot on their own to start with, and then once they're in combat, I will change them from fighting in combat into shooting in combat. Watch how this goes. See how they got their swords out? Let's tell them not to fight with swords. Let's tell them to load and fire no matter who's close to us. Now, you'll notice a vast improvements in their performance. That's mostly because this unit doesn't have shields, but the same principle applies. It's worth noting that low-level gunners don't do well against units with shields. Alright, in this next little segment, I'm going to show you how to fire faster with your unit. If you allow them just to attack, either using V or to press 1 to fire in the direction, they'll continue to fire at a set rate. Now we're going to mess with the way that the game works a little bit, and we're going to ask our gunners to shoot faster. We're going to do that by moving and shooting again with the 1 key. Do you watch how much quicker they fire? And nice giant volleys too. The additional benefit for this is you can move the whole unit around as you go. You can move to the right, you can move to the left, you can slowly work your way into cover, all while keeping up a constant rate of fire that hits hard. This is the best way to use gunners who are not using a specific unit order. Like number 2 for this unit is to advance as they fire, which is an ability I virtually never use. And as you can see, as you move and fire, they do vastly better than had they not been using this tactic. This is almost the #1 tactic for all gunners, except perhaps Kreigsrats and Tersios, which I hope to show you soon. Remember to keep this in mind. Also, units like this, they hit better when they are closer. The closer to the target, the more likely you are to hit. That is true for all gunners. Alright boys and girls, the very next one in our stable here are the Kreigsrat Fusiliers. Hugely favourite unit of mine. I absolutely love how devastating they are. Now the thing about Kreigsrat Fusiliers is they're actually quite good in melee. They'll destroy any lesser unit in melee combat. You're not going to destroy paladins or stalwarts, forget it. Right? But I just want you to watch what happens. Look at how many bullets those shields absorb. Kreigsrats are actually a very, very accurate unit. But when they get to that front line of Kreigsrats, you'll see that the Kreigsrats not only shoot, they also bayonet. They bayonet, then they shoot, which is incredibly effective. So against any against any blue or green tier unit, they should be able to beat them in combat unless they're a particularly good one. Right, now that we've seen the Kreigsrat shoot and fight in melee at the same time, we're going to show you what it's like to try and maneuver them and fire them in the same way that you shoot the lesser gunner units. Here we go. This is them firing normally. See how accurate they are? We're going to try firing one. We're going to move them across. See how half the unit doesn't move? So it's very hard with this unit to go left, right, and do the one press to increase your rate of fire. Their rate of fire is already extremely impressive, and you'll see that if you use the one key to allow them to shoot only and no melee, they will still decimate the unit in front of them, possibly more effective than the bayonets themselves. Here we go. What I've done now is I've pressed 5 to tell them to do melee only. So they are not going to shoot at all. This is their melee ability versus a shield unit. Now of course these are very weak units in the training room, but you get the idea. If they come across a lesser unit, serfs, that sort of thing, they'll absolutely destroy them. Alright, the penultimate unit on the tech tree for Arquebusiers is the Imperial Arquebusiers. This unit has the highest DPS in the game of any unit of any kind, and that's down really to their volley fire ability number 2. They fire at an increased rate, with higher accuracy, higher damage and higher armor penetration. They also can punch through shields. Also, if you take the specific veterancy line, they get additional shots per volley, which is a very high chance of firing additional shots. The only problem with them, of course, is they're made of tissue paper and gasoline-soaked rags, so that when you do get into combat like this, they tend to die. So they very much have to be protected. Don't forget, if you're fighting a unit like this, you can still use your one key to finish off the unit quite happily. The biggest threat to this unit particularly is, well, heroes, ranged heroes, and archers of any kind. They don't take much to kill them. Here's some archers now. So here's a good chance to demonstrate the move and fire with number 1 ability. Because they have a great rate of fire, do high armor penetration and high damage, they will wipe out this unit pretty quickly. The best thing about Imperial Arquebusiers is that they tend to fire at heroes instead of units. They'll prioritise heroes as targets instead of model units. Alright, so now we come to the ultimate unit in the Arquebusier line, the Tersio Arquebusiers. Now this is my favourite unit in the game for a number of reasons. They fire fast, they hit hard, they punch through shields, but also they're extremely tough. They have good armor values and high health, which allows them to do things like this. Just like the Kreigsrat Fusiliers, they can fight in melee combat. What they have that the Fusiliers don't is a parry ability. So when you're fighting not necessarily these low-level swordsmen, but things like heroes, cavalry, or nasty purple tier sword and shield units, they have an ability that will trigger and cause no ill effects from the hit. So they take 0 damage and they don't take whatever additional, they don't take a bleed or anything like that as well, which makes them very nasty. So now I'll show you them versus a sword and shield unit, using the one attack so that they don't transform into the melee pose when they're fighting. Now this can be effective on these light units like this, because they'll keep firing with their absolutely brutal firearms, but you don't get the parry ability because you're not in melee stance. But as you can see, it's pretty darn effective anyway. We're not taking a lot of damage from this melee unit. Now, one thing that the Tersios are not good at, just like the Kreigsrat Fusiliers, is the moving as well as firing, because their firing animation is quite long and locks you in. See how only half the unit moves? It doesn't work. See? They don't get moving. So if you're going to move away from combat danger with this unit, move them early. Now, as you can see, into the melee stance, this unit will quite happily decimate lesser units. Serfs, Rattan pikemen, squires, they'll kill them all. Just wipe them out, just like this. Alrighty, something else we need to talk about real quick is Doctrines. Let's have a look. Guess we'll look at the higher tier chaps. Now I do know that some of you who aren't playing on the booming Frontier servers won't have a lot of these purple Doctrines, and they don't even exist for your version of the game, but I have them. So I have to talk about them. Here we go. So my favourite things to add to the gunner units really come down to a number of different things. The first one is, well, accuracy, really. Accuracy's got to help. All right, every chance I get, I add accuracy to my gunners, because it's the number one thing, right? They're not a particularly accurate unit, and you've got to get them closer and closer and closer to hit. So the number one thing I add is accuracy. After that, rate of fire is my next favourite thing. The aim and ready time is also fun, and if you can get an ammo doctrine or veterancy line thing, it's good but not super important. Kreigsrats really can't get a lot of ammunition themselves. As you can see, I've gone top line here. Aiming speed, which is brilliant. Firing accuracy, rate of fire, piercing damage, good, and firing accuracy. Those, of course, being my favourite type of things. So if we go back to Imperials, what do we got here? Oops, where am I going? Here. Increase rate of fire, increase accuracy. Damage dealt to heroes is fun because they do slaughter heroes. 100 extra damage in siege battles, fantastic. 95 extra damage to units. I mean, right now this elite Imperial Arquebusier unit is good to go. If you can get a unit like this, you are absolutely in the god tier seat. My Tersio is my favourite unit in the game. Increase the rate of fire, of course. I've increased the accuracy, of course, and most of it's based on extra damage. And because the Tersios are a particularly tanky unit, I've actually increased their health and defence as well, just to be a little bit of a boost to that. Things like Demesne Arquebusiers and Ironcap Arquebusiers, not so much. You don't need that. They're going to die anyway, right? We'll just flick down to my... There we go. As you can see, move and fire, very handy. It just means that as they're moving, they'll stop, fire, stop, fire, stop, fire. If you do the V and drag. Sea Stags, I never ever use them. They are honestly the worst gunner unit in the game by a long way. Totally not worth their leadership. Don't recommend them. If you're going to get a premium unit, absolutely get the Metallurgy. And who else we got? Arquebusiers. I've never been particularly fond of this unit here, mainly because they're extremely limited in their flexibility by their inability to move straight away. Like, they're locked in place, and I don't like that on my gunners. But if you like them, they're great. These guys will massacre heroes. You put them in a little defensive point in a place where they can't be seen by archers and things like that, they'll do a great job protecting that point. But they're not my style. And Demesnes, move and fire is good for them because they're low health and low armor. Yeah, and of course extra piercing damage and armor penetration. So that's the sort of thing that I'm going for. As you can see, this is not a unit I use particularly a lot because I got the higher tier gunners. But let's just quickly pop to the Imperial Arquebusiers. This one here, the chance of firing extra rounds during volley fire. Now that procs means triggers really quite often, so it's absolutely beastly. Extra damage, screw you cavalry, more damage, and some health, which is not that great. As you can see, they fall over in a strong wind. You smoke a cigarette next to them and they catch fire. It's terrible. And my Tersios, extra rate of fire, no question. Melee damage taken by 10%, who cares? You're going to avoid getting these guys into combat if you can. Of course, as we've just demonstrated, they can slaughter smaller, weaker units, but the chances of Tersios coming up against those units is relatively low. Break blocking status, that's absolutely quite lovely. Rate of fire, damage, accuracy, all defense, all armor penetration, and rain debuffs. Now this is quite critical. You see, I can't find any literature on this, but it is something I wanted to talk about. Rain debuff by 50%. When you start a battle, and in the top right corner, when you're choosing your units, it has a rain cloud, you have a rain debuff on all gunpowder units. Now, this isn't something I can find a lot written about, but it does happen. Okay, so you need to be aware that if you want to go into a battle and you want to take your 3 favorite Arquebusier units, if it's raining, maybe don't. Yeah? Okay, boys and girls, it's time for some real-world combat situations. The sound in this video is a little bit hinky, so I've just turned it off. So all you're going to get is my beautiful voice telling you all about this. Now, when you're using gunners, the number one thing you have to remember is don't get them killed. Now that might sound obvious, but it's different to things like sword and shield units, or tower shields, or even cavalry, because things that go into combat have to take casualties, or at least put themselves in danger to be able to, well, perform. So what I'm thinking here is I'm in a trebbable place and I'm a little bit uncomfortable leaving them out. They walk quite quickly, so we can pull them out when we need them. So for now, we're going to tuck them away in a nice quiet corner. Hopefully they won't gather mold there, no dust, but we see the little ladders come up on the right hand side there. In this battle, I believe there were some things about to come around the corner that I knew were there, which is why I'm mucking around with this Scorpio. And the Scorpio can help down here because anything that gets hit by the flaminess, they'll stop charging, so that will help our friendly unit there as well. Now, as you can see on the minimap, there's some people mucking around, and this trebuchet here is exactly what I was worried about. These Kreigsrats, see how they got the bayonet? You can tell them apart, is what's going on. So I'm aware that they're there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my guys down, and let's watch what happens. Now remember, gunners tend to target heroes as a priority, so after that first volley, boom, they wanted them. And these Imperial Pike Guard are not going to survive more than a few seconds. Absolutely devastating with the rate of fire, the accuracy, and the damage and pen that they do. Now, I'm thinking, what's going on here? Are there any archers? What's going on? I don't know for certain that they're not going to get killed. So I can't shoot at anything right now. Because I can't shoot at them, I'm going to keep them safe as a priority. If cavalry charges up this ramp or things, they'd die. But now we've got some stalwarts or spear sergeants in the way, we can come out and we can start wreaking absolute havoc. And here's where I'm using the ability of move them slightly and fire. You can see how my number 2 ability, the volley fire, wasn't up. So in the meantime, I'm doing this. Now the volley fire's up, we're going to kick in and absolutely slaughter everything in front of us. Now they're going to keep firing at anything that's within their cone of fire, the area of effect if you like. Spoiler, we're going to lose that C point, but what does that mean for us as the person playing with the gunners? That means that I have to preserve my unit as a priority. At the moment there are no threats whatsoever, but we're within treb range, and see how we're taking arrow fire now? Number 1 thing to do, preserve the unit. So we're going to run like a scared rabbit. The good thing is, just like Nemo's dad says, I said this in one of my videos recently, you come out of the enemy, you go back in the enemy. You come out of the enemy, you come back in the enemy. And when it's safe to do so, you keep going. As you can see, I was right to be scared of the treb. Here's something else about gunners. They don't shoot up and down very well. Not at all. The reason here I'm not doing the move and fire thing is I don't actually want to move them. I don't want them to come further out and get shot. You can see here that my volley fire is not working down on a lower area, and we're getting arrow fire coming in, so we're going to move away and keep the unit safe as a priority. Because they fall down in a strong breeze, if you sneeze on them, they're going to die of some sort of minor virus, so we don't want that to happen. And here we go again. We're going to use the move and fire ability until our volley fire is back up. This will work with all gunners, whether it's Ironcaps, whether it's Demesne, whether it's, well, Sea Stag Death Dealers will never hit anything at this range, but all gunners will work like this. But the Imperials are quite accurate as a unit, which is why they can hit at this sort of range. The Kreigsrats will also be fine at this range. Tersios, not so much. They need to be closer. As you can see, this dual blades here has signed his own death warrant because we have a volley fire up. And you can see that they penetrate these stalwart shields regardless. And unfortunately, our good luck has come to an end here. These Azaps are going to envelop me. I can't get away, and I'm going to die a miserable, horrible death. Let's have a look at another clip. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to show you part of this clip, just the bit where we execute some heroes, because gunners are particularly good at that. So what I'm doing here when I'm playing around with them is I'm just thinking about where should I keep them to keep them safe. Do I want them forward a bit? Do I want them back a bit? And ultimately I decide that here is a good idea because it keeps them under the ballistic arc of the arrows if there were to be archers on the wall behind us. Archers being a major danger to gunners. So at this point I'm feeling fairly safe. I feel like we're not in any danger. So we're going to follow our troops into battle. And just out the corner of my eye there, I see a fellow hero in trouble. And I think to myself, Why don't we form a firing squad and execute some heroes? Big mistake, buddy. Get ourselves 2, and as you can see, we very nearly killed a third behind. He got away with a slither of health. That's life. RNG will sometimes bless you and sometimes screw you. Alrighty, well there's a couple of really nice clips for you. If you're wondering why I chose the Imperial Arquebusiers for that, they're actually very flexible and they have a lot of the attributes of most of the gunners at once. So, anyway, that concludes my gunner tutorial for Conqueror's Blade. I hope you learned something new, or you just enjoyed watching the video. Thanks for coming to the channel. Hey guys, Knight here. Thanks for watching my videos. I make these in my spare time for a bit of fun, so hopefully you learned something or you just enjoyed watching. It would really help me out if you would subscribe and like my videos. See you on the battlefield.